Hello YouTube and welcome back to another episode of Scoped In with myself, William Cho. We have VCT Ascension going on right now all around the world, which means we've got teams from challengers leagues of all the different countries joining up for a chance to get into the VCT leagues, right? So VCT Americas, VCT EMEA, and of course VCT Pacific. I'll actually be flying to Bangkok literally in about a little over 12 hours to help wrap up the ending of VCT Ascension Pacific and see who's going to be entering VCT Pacific next year. But in celebration of that, I thought we'd check out a bit of an interesting comp and play that we saw coming out from one of the teams in Ascension right now. There's a couple funky things that we've been seeing from different teams and their own colors and interpretations. But one thing that really stood out to me was coming out from Fancy United Esports representing Vietnam, and it's going to be Phoenix as the lone duelist on Fracture. Let's jump right in. First things first, let's take a look at the composition. So it's going to be Phoenix as the lone duelist, and then you've got Astra and Viper as the double controller, a single initiator and breach, and then you've got the Killjoy. So clearly with the Viper, obviously you can stall and cut up the map into, smaller pieces. The Astra can help a little bit in that, but the Astra, I oftentimes call her a bit of a semi-initiator plus controller. So she can also be the one who's helping opening up sites or reactively helping defend it. And then, of course, that allows Breach to not have to worry about the entire map himself when he's trying to be that initiator for the team as well. I would say this team's really just missing two big things, right? One is a movement ability to entry in, and really kind of widen those angles, right? Break apart the crosshairs, things like that, and dive into backside or top of site, certain parts of the site that might be more difficult to get into. And then on top of that, you don't have any info, right? You don't have a Fade or a Sova, obviously, getting more and more popular in Fracture. Things like that. So they are lacking a little bit, but Fancy has found some ways to make this work. So let's take a look at round 4. They are currently on defense, and because it's a Phoenix, a lot of their combat basically has to be close quarters. So we see the Phoenix lined up on the A side right now, and they're hiding right outside of door. And as soon as they're kind of sure that they want to go for a fight, you've got the Breach to support as well. The Astra is just going to buy time with their own smoke and try to be the person who gets intel, and they pop out. And if we watch, we didn't get to see it on the screen, but if we rewind just a bit here, I'll pause it. Yeah, so right as this happens, basically what we saw was the fault line was used, and then obviously the curveball was used to come out of the door, and then a gravity well as well. So again, kind of semi-initiator in the Astra, but you're always going to be prepared right around. So there is a bit of a risk, right? Because if they walk in and they suddenly open the door against you, you're probably not prepared. And to counteract that, basically what Fancy did was they had the Astra on Yes I Can on the Astra peeking out so that they don't let anyone pass through by walking by. So now we take a look at round 7, and you're going to notice that Fancy is setting up for a similar play up at Dish, right? So the Phoenix is going to wait right by the Dish, and then we'll have the Killjoy be the contact. Phoenix will play off of it, and the idea is all pretty decent, but of course, this time it's not going to work out. We'll take a look at why. And you're going to see that the curveball basically goes a little bit too far. And I quite frankly think there's a world where this could have worked if he actually threw the curveball to the left, because then everyone would have been flashed. But either way, the Rays, as soon as they get contact, they kind of swing out anyways, and they spot the Phoenix right away. And Nissy's going to get caught, and he dies. So it doesn't work out. Now, this shows, okay, so Fancy understands what they need to do to make this composition work, but it also shows the weaknesses, right? You're always going to need someone else to be contact, to play contact for you, and then the Phoenix has to throw the curveball. Because if you're only relying on audio, it's not always a guarantee. You might let someone slide by, they might get the first peek on you, so there's a bit of danger. So there are these very distinct gaps in the defense from Fancy with this composition. Now, round 11, we see a default screen that they've been using a lot on the B side. So this toxic screen, now it serves several options. They actually use another one here this way as well on B. And basically both of these screens, the goal would be to, first of all, deter kind of the initial entry into the site, especially this one on main, right? Because now this hides any fact that they might have pushed out from main, which it looks like they're going to do in this round. And then even afterwards, it's going to deter them from getting into the sites, and it helps with the retake. So pretty good screen overall. It's not anything crazy new. But the way they're going to use this with the Phoenix is quite interesting. Now, again, it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out in this round. But it's an interesting idea because you've got the breach as well. So first of all, the fault line, and then the hot hands come out. And the hot hands are actually going to get some kills here because it locks them up. He's standing on it. And meanwhile, the Phoenix had gone through. Now, what you end up noticing is, okay, the fault line and the hot hands combo is good. The Phoenix hides into the toxic screen, and they're ready with a curveball. And had Heisey not gotten flashed himself here, I think there's a world where they can do a bit of an interesting double flash with the curveball and the flashpoint to make sure they suss out anyone like Wits who's hiding behind the toxic screen, and they can really solidify the set play to open up the round. Unfortunately, this time it doesn't work out, right? The curveball actually goes over, and it only hits Wits. It doesn't actually clear out the rest of the team, like Mojer, who's kind of sitting out right outside of the toxic screen and things like that. But okay, now curveball and flashpoint, we're starting to see, okay, you can try and chain these together, especially with your own toxic screen, to help flash out like both sides of the wall or the screen, and be able to have that advantage in the duel that way. Now we take a look at round 20, and what happened at the beginning of this round is basically you had the Phoenix and the Killjoy hiding out at the top of the map, and once they got no contact, they have everyone slowly join up over the ropes, and they make no noise coming into Dish. Now they have all these ultimates available, ready to go. We're going to see the Cosmic Divide come up. It actually splits up the site so that they don't even have to worry about main. And this was my question when watching this, was Phoenix is actually not that great to drop down from Dish because you don't have ways to really clear out both sides. You don't have any movement to jump way across into main, but they get rid of that by saying, well, we'll simply just have to worry about the site itself with the Cosmic Divide. And then they curveball out. They even put this pit up from Dish. But here's the thing. Naus had no information of a main, and while Fancy suspects the Rolling Thunder to potentially hit the site so they empty it, the mind game works out even better where all the ultimates are used on main, and then Fancy's just hanging out. They have the hot hands to use as a molly. They have their own Rolling Thunder as well to deter. And it's really overall just a great team call, right? Starting with the idea that Phoenix hides here as a trap play. They get no contact. They walk into Dish with no audio. They use just one ultimate to get the plant and bait out potential other ultimates on the retake. That way they still have their own Rolling Thunder to save. And this wasn't really the Phoenix that made things happen, but basically what I wanted to point out is, okay, they use the Cosmic Divide to shore up the weaknesses that the Phoenix might have, because the Phoenix alone can almost never entry in from Dish. And so this is a part of the map that you weren't able to really take advantage of the entire half. And now that you have these ultimates, you say, well, these are the times we can do it. And now you're putting that mental pressure onto your opponents. So the very next day, on day 2 of VCT Ascension Pacific, we have Fancy playing Xerxia, and Xerxia is going to be the one picking Fracture again as well. They probably saw this comp and thought, okay, well, it's pretty straightforward. There's only a couple things they can do, and it is quite similar, actually, the way they play it. Basically, what we're going to see is Fancy, once again, they like to do the whole walk up. And the reason they walk up with no audio is, again, they cannot begin their entry from far away. They don't have any dashes. They don't have sprints. You need Phoenix to be ready to go, like, right outside the gates of the site if you want to entry. And basically, they start clearing out the top portion of the site. They've got the fault line. Now, a bit of an accident happens here, and eventually they're actually going to lose out on this round. But if we look at the setup here, this is another set play they do often. We'll see it right as it. Okay, so we saw the breach. He actually, I believe, flashed for Sands so that the rest of the team can come here. So they're trying to set up a pinch. And meanwhile, he fault lines this side. He aftershocked the second floor. So second floor is aftershocked. Fault lines the staircase. So that way, when the curveball goes through, whoever is hiding either like right under the stairs or, if they're hiding here or here, the Phoenix is going to win the fight. Now, unfortunately for Nizzy, not only does Alert actually get a timing to peek out from exactly the spot that gets hit by none of these, he doesn't even get hit by the curveball, but there's also an amazing fault line coming out from Stirapop that's going to hit Nizzy and he gets stunned. So that alone shuts it down. So great, props to Xerxia on that as well. But the idea being that Fancy has to slowly walk up. And one of the reasons that Xerxia was aware that this was happening, because you started to throw the poison cloud to make sure that you mask, how many people are splitting on A and things like that from Fancy. So Xerxia gets the call of, okay, it is actually A, and then great decision from Sirapop. But either way, Fancy does this a lot on their attacks, right? They start to just cut noise wherever they're going, whether it's here, whether it's arcade, whether it's A main, or even B. They will always cut noise, get ready, and then they just pop all of their attacks to go in, and that's how they utilize the Phoenix. And there's another round where now we can actually see the trap play that Fancy often uses, and it's going to be on the north side of the map. So you see the Phoenix, he's crouched, as we can see on the op screen right there, and he's waiting to play off of contact from the turret. He can curveball either way. Of course, he's watching the arcade side as well. And they don't get any contact. So right around the 120 mark, which is what happened in the game previous as well, they get no contact, and they all slowly take the rope across. And what do we see? They've got those ultimates ready to go again, right? They've got the Rolling Thunder. They've got the same thing like the Cosmic Divide and the Viper's Pit. So they make no noise, and they're coming up to dish. Now, Xerxia gets a good read on this. And so they have the operator here. Alert actually doesn't get the first kill. So he's just going to have to back off. But he throws a great paint shells, and that deters them long enough where that idea doesn't work out. So Fancy then goes back to, okay, well, tried and true, old trustworthy, which is go through arcade and go through B tower. Because that's one of the parts that Phoenix can really shine in. And you see his entire kit being used here. Throws the curveball first, and then we should... Oh, he doesn't use it here this time, but sometimes he'll use the blaze wall to get through up into tower. He threw the hot hands into tower as well. And then he's got another curveball that he can use to bump into sight. And he's even got the run it back to actually just negate the Rolling Thunder, get information on sight. And then he's going to peek out and try to help break open the entire site. And we can see it's very, very successful. A bit bloody, but very successful. And I think that's what's impressive about this composition, is that there are some areas that he's clearly very strong in, like the curveball around door, throwing hot hands up into B tower, and then curveballing, whether it's right as you get off the rope or whether it's coming out into sight, curveballing from arcade to make sure that no one can peek the cross, using the blaze, the wall that he has to deny that information. There are some very obvious ideas. However, they will then sprinkle in things like, okay, well, when we have ultimates, we might go dish, right? And then other times we'll still cut noise. This very next round, they set up the same trap lane. When they get no contact, they actually come back and they go south part of the map, things like that. So Fancy understands the value of mental conditioning. And while their composition has some glaring weaknesses, they shore that up by timing it with these ultimates or just throwing these mental curveballs. So that's Fancy United Esports' composition on Fracture, which consists of Phoenix as the lone duelist, then you've got the single initiator in Breach, double controller in Astra and Viper, and last but not least, the Killjoy as the Sentinel. Not traditional, does have some glaring weaknesses, but so far they're showcasing that they understand those weaknesses, and they're shoring it up with different timings, with different ultimates and things like that. So I'm curious to see how this continues to develop. We've also seen some other interesting picks at VCT Ascension Pacific as well. So we've seen the Phoenix comp that Paper Rex uses on Pearl being used by Scars as well. And then Bleed continues to showcase their Reyna comp on Pearl, which also has some legs, although it finally did suffer that loss to Scars in overtime. So there are some interesting ideas, and just like we saw at Masters Tokyo with things like Paper X's comp or EG's composition on Fracture with the Sova, I think the meta's obviously still developing and evolving. So curious to see how this all works out, and will any of the Tier 1 teams pick these up for LCQ? Let's keep an eye on it. Of course, VCT Ascension Pacific continues for this weekend to determine the final winner of VCT Ascension to see who gets into VCT Pacific. I'm flying to Bangkok right away after this recording, so I will be there for the finals weekend. I'll see you guys there.